There's a new edition of D&D, and a lot of people are looking at alternatives at this time, and so I thought now would be a great time to continue my law school series about Pathfinder 2e. They double as ways to learn the system as well as learn the reasons for the design decisions in Pathfinder as compared to the market leader, D&D. The playlist will be linked at the end of the video and in my video description, and today we're going to cover the death and dying rules, poison, persistent damage, and the medicine skill in Pathfinder. First, I'll introduce myself. I am Ronald, the rules lawyer. I am a lawyer who runs tabletop games. For several years, I ran an after-school middle school RPG class, and so teaching is in my blood. If you haven't yet, support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. For an explanation, see this video. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. The death and dying rules in Pathfinder want to retain the sense of danger. One common criticism of D&D 5e is that of pop-up healing, where a character getting knocked out doesn't have much of a negative consequence. So long as one of your spellcasters has the appropriate spell slot, you can cast a spell like Mass Healing Word, a bonus action that doesn't compete with your main action, that can bring up to 6 allies back into the battle. That means that a meta has developed in the D&D community of saving your healing slots for when someone actually gets knocked out, because otherwise you might be wasting your healing. It also means that the danger facing your party is kind of proportional to how many spell slots you have left in your party. And once you're out of those healing resources, you're getting towards a TPK. From the DM's perspective, it makes it hard to present a fair yet challenging fight. You're either killing nobody or everybody, unless you're fudging, which not everybody wants to do. Alright, how does it work in Pathfinder? When you are knocked down to 0 hit points, you become unconscious. You also drop everything in your hands, and you move in the initiative track to right before the effect that knocked you out. This always means that the entire party has a full round to try to help you. You also gain the dying condition, which has a numerical value. You become dying 1 unless you were struck down with a critical hit or went down to 0 hit points because you critically failed a saving throw, which is a thing in Pathfinder if you fail the DC of, say, a fireball by 10 or more. Death comes at dying 4. If you're still dying when your turn comes around pretty much a round later, you do a flat check at the start of your turn. Flat check means you roll your d20 and add no modifiers to it. The number you need equals 10 plus your dying value. So if you're dying 1, you need an 11 on the die roll. If you fail this recovery check, your dying value goes up by 1. If it succeeds, it goes down by 1, and if it goes down to 0, it goes away. As in much of Pathfinder, its 4 degrees of success system is in effect. So if a dragon critically hits you and sends you to dying 2, and you roll a 2 on your recovery check, that's a critical failure, your dying value increases by 2 to dying 4 and you're dead. To give some layer of protection from that, every character gets 1 hero point at the start of a new play session. You can earn hero points from the Game Master through play. They let you re-roll a die, but the other way to use them is called heroic recovery. If your dying value would increase, you spend all of your hero points as long as you have at least 1, and you lose the dying condition and don't die. Your dying value can also increase when you take damage. If you're in the area of a fireball and you take damage, your dying value increases accordingly. That means if you critically fail against that fireball while dying, it goes up by 2. Alright, it sounds pretty deadly so far, but if you get hit points back, you're back in the game, right? Well, not exactly. When you lose the dying condition, you gain the wounded condition. You become wounded 1. And if you already were wounded when you recovered, you add 1 to your wounded condition. It actually doesn't matter if you were at dying 3 or so. The wounded value only goes up by 1. What does wounded do? Well, when you get knocked out again to 0 hit points, you add your wounded value to your initial dying value. So if you were wounded 1 and that dragon critically hits you, you go straight to dying 3 when you are knocked out. Critical hit would have put you at dying 2, that wounded value increases it to 3. I'll note here that spending your hero points for heroic recovery to prevent death, losing the dying condition then does not increase your wounded value. So this means that there are real consequences for getting knocked out in Pathfinder. Even if you were to be healed again, this wounded condition means that you are very close to death, if not getting instantly killed, if you are knocked out again. And there's an action cost. Remember when I said you drop everything when you are knocked out? It costs an action to stand up, one of your 3 actions to stand up. And it's an action to pick up an item. These rules together add tension and excitement to combat. It matters if someone is at low health and in danger of getting knocked out. And yes, I'll just acknowledge it is not as deadly as older school games where you died at 0 hit points. But Pathfinder strikes a balance and understands that in a game where characters are as intricate and full-featured as they are in Pathfinder, you don't want to make a new character every half session. Before I move on, I need to mention how instant death from massive damage works. You die if a single blow does hit point damage equal to or greater than double your maximum hit points. In this respect, it's actually more generous than D&D. Being at 1 hit point does not make you closer to instant death. In my experience, after, say, the first couple of levels, there is no instant death in Pathfinder 2e with the way that hit points scale, unless you're falling from a huge height. You can take up to 750 damage from that. Alright, how does poison work in Pathfinder? Well, one criticism of poison in D&D is that it's just another kind of damage. If it comes from a giant scorpion, you make a constitution saving throw to reduce it by half, but once it comes through, might as well call it green damage. This contributes to a feeling that monsters in the system are somewhat bland. Poison needs some kick. There actually is a condition, the poisoned condition in 5e, which is pretty debilitating, but maybe too debilitating. Sometimes you want something more nuanced than a hammer, and it's always the same hammer too. In Pathfinder, poisons are distinct from other kinds of damage, and they have unique effects, and they can persist. Poisons are a kind of affliction in Pathfinder, along with diseases and curses. And like the dying condition, they have their own track. They develop in stages. A single sting from a giant scorpion can harry you for several rounds and get worse from round to round. It has a maximum duration of 6 rounds, however. So how does it work? When you're exposed to a poison, such as when you're stung by a giant scorpion sting, you make a fortitude save against the poison. There's only 3 saving throws in Pathfinder: Fortitude, Reflex, and Will, that deal with physical resistance, dodging, and mental resistance, respectively. Just like in 3rd and 4th edition D&D. The 4 degrees of success are at work here. If you fail to get an 18 or higher, you go to stage 1. If you have an 8 or lower, you take the express train to stage 2. What happens if you're exposed again? The scorpion stings you again. Well, you make a saving throw, and it can increase your poison stage. It cannot decrease it, for obvious reasons. This means that if that scorpion stings you twice, you might find yourself at stage 3. And when your turn comes around, this is your chance to get out of the hole. At the end of your turn, you make a saving throw against the poison. And if you still have the poison at the end of that roll, you take the effect of that stage. So if when your turn starts, you're at stage 2 of scorpion venom, you can end your turn at stage 3 and getting its effect, recover to stage 1 and get its effect, or you can roll 28 or higher and critically succeed and get rid of the poison altogether. If you were to visualize the progress of your poison, it can oscillate up and down like this. Many poisons have a maximum duration of 6 rounds. Being exposed again while you were still trying to fight off the first poison will not increase that duration. You still count 6 rounds off from the initial exposure. But this all shows you that every +1 matters in this system, especially against an affliction that you're making several saving throws against. And this is where we talk about one use of the medicine skill, the treat poison action. It's a single action, and you try to beat the poison's DC. And if you succeed, you give them a +2 circumstance bonus to their next saving throw against the poison. A critical success gives a +4. And if you're terrible at your check, you critically fail, you give them a -2 penalty. So every +1 matters on your check as well, and all of these bonuses stack up to make the difference between life and death. Let's look at the other kinds of afflictions, curses, and diseases. They also have stages and work much the same way. They just have longer durations usually than 1 round for each stage. A critique of 5e is that curses and diseases tend to not matter much because there are effects in the game like the 3rd level Remove Curse spell that just automatically succeeds at removing the curse. In older editions of D&D, you had to set aside a slot for that day for each individual casting. Now you can just fire off one of your many spell slots and make curses and diseases largely irrelevant. But in Pathfinder, they matter. Here is the curse that comes from a ghoul that can turn you into a ghoul. Ghouls, by the way, don't have paralysis and don't give a disease. in Pathfinder. They've been changed in the remaster. Basically, if you're grabbed or helpless, they can spend an action to whisper in your ear about forbidden cravings. You know, that desire that you repress in yourself of eating raw meat. Here you have to make a will saving throw, and if you're dealing with a typical level 1 ghoul stalker, you need to beat the number 17. As with poisons, this is the same number you have to contend with each new saving throw. As for removing this, it is more nuanced in Pathfinder. We have this second rank spell called Cleanse Affliction, which works against curses and diseases and poisons. At its base rank, you cannot actually remove any of these afflictions. All you can do is, if it has advanced past stage 2, reduce it by 1 stage, and you could only do it once per affliction. This means that they have to succeed on a saving throw to actually get rid of it, basically. The higher ranked versions can attempt to counteract the affliction and remove it entirely. Counteracting involves comparing the strength of your curing effect with the strength of the affliction. It's a rules subsystem. Casting this spell against a level 1 ghoul's forbidden cravings curse compared to a level 9 ghoul's curse is going to be much easier. In fact, you can even succeed while failing your counteract check and not critically failing. For a full explanation, I'll refer you all to the excellent channel How It's Played and their video. I'll have a link in the description. Just note that when it refers to a spell level or counteract level in that video, those have been renamed ranks. Pathfinder renamed things that had a similar progression of power to ranks to avoid confusion with character levels and item levels. Alright, let's look at that ghoul curse because it's actually pretty cool. At stage 1 you feel fine, relatively, no ill effects. But at stage 2 you take 2d6 void damage, that's like undead energy damage. And in addition, you are sickened 1 until you consume raw meat. Sickened 1 means a penalty to all of your statistics that rely on a d20 roll, basically. So a penalty to your attack rolls, to your spellcasting DCs, to your saving throws, to your armor class even. Stage 3 is the same. Stage 4 represents the growing power the curse has on you. You actually can avoid the effects if you consumed raw meat yesterday. And all of this becomes very interesting because the final stage kills you and makes you rise as a ghoul only if you have eaten raw meat in the last 24 hours. So the very thing that ameliorates the effects of this curse is what brings you over the brink. You're punished for trying to resist it. So very cool and thematic. So those are afflictions. Now, what if you are set on fire? Let's look at persistent damage and how it works in Pathfinder. It's actually not very different from in D&D. I would just say that it's generally tougher to get rid of it. In Pathfinder, there's an alchemist bomb called Alchemist's Fire. It deals 1 persistent fire damage if it lands. So how does it work? If you're on fire, then at the end of your turn, you take the damage and then you try to remove it. So it's different from poison in that respect. It's still at the end of your turn that you make some kind of save against it, but you take the damage guaranteed here. Then you roll a flat check, and you need a 15 to succeed. That is only a 30% chance on the d20, so it's quite stubborn. I've seen, in one comical instance, somebody dying after failing about 15 times in a row. So does everyone just watch you die while this happens? No, there's a way to help you out called assisted recovery. You can also assisted recovery yourself. Basically, doing something appropriate that the GM approves gives the sufferer a bonus flat check to try to shake off the condition. And these attempts usually involve a skill check themselves. And it usually costs 2 actions. So let's say they pick up a carpet and try to smother you with it. The GM can call for a roll of any kind. It could be an attack roll, a skill check, let's say athletics, or a reflex saving throw to try to beat out the fire even. The DC of the check is the DC of the original effect that gave you the persistent damage in the first place. So let's say a level 2 spellcaster cast Ignition on you and sets you on fire. The DC would be 18 to aid. If a level 1 item like Alchemist's Fire sets you on fire, then according to the level DC chart, you'll need to beat a DC 15. These DCs only affect your effort to assist. The sufferer needs to still succeed at a DC 15 flat check. Now, there are particularly appropriate forms of assistance that lower the sufferer's DC to 10. Things like dousing someone who's on fire with a bucket of water. That's the example given in the book. Needs GM approval, of course. And then there are other things that automatically end when it makes sense, such as if you're on fire, jumping into a lake. But as you can see, persistent damage can be something that the entire party gets involved in, and it usually is resolved, in my experience, after the monsters have been defeated. Just a little note here, persistent bleed damage is a bit easier to get rid of than other kinds of persistent damage. If you are restored to full health, then persistent bleed damage ends. Also, you can administer first aid with the medicine skill, which, if successful, is considered particularly appropriate, and so the bleeder only needs a 10 on their flat check. So let's put it all together and see how terrible and dangerous persistent damage and poisons are in the game. What happens when a knocked out player is suffering from poison or persistent damage? Well, we know that damage increases your dying value, and this is where the evil GM laughter comes. Yes, persistent damage and poison are nasty in this system, and many deaths in Pathfinder I've seen are caused by them. Alright, so let's say an alchemist fire knocks you out. They didn't critically succeed, so you're only at dying 1. Your initiative moves to about a round later, and when your turn starts, you need to immediately make a recovery check. If you fail that check, your dying value increases to 2. However, you're still on fire, so at the end of your turn, you take 1 fire damage, and it only takes 1 point of damage to increase your dying value. You now go to dying 3, and it's only after you take the damage that you attempt your flat check. And remember how hard it is to shake it off. You need a 15 on the d20 roll. By the way, if you were poisoned as well, you combine the damage at the end of your turn to create a single instance of damage, so it only increases your dying by 1, thank goodness. But also remember that the 4 degrees of success are at play here, and you die at dying 4. So if that alchemist fire critically hits you and you went straight to dying 2, then you could be dead by now. Or your recovery check at the start of your next turn could have been a critical failure also. If what you're dealing with is poison instead, you can critically fail on your saving throw against that, which would increase your dying by 2. If you were already at stage 2 of scorpion venom when you were knocked out, then even succeeding on your saving throw against it at the end of your turn might still only bring you up to stage 1. You still take damage, and your dying value still increases. If you're new to Pathfinder and come from 5e and have the habit of healing somebody only 4 hit points or so, then they might easily get knocked out again. But remember, when they recover, they gain the wounded condition. So another alchemist fire hitting a wounded 1 ally will send them straight to dying 2 or dying 3. It's nasty out there, and poison and persistent damage are frightening in this system, and awesome. So let's also cover the medicine skill in Pathfinder, which, like other skills in D&D, is often criticized as not really mattering. You can use medicine to stabilize a dying ally. However, the healer's kit, which is only 5 gold pieces, automatically succeeds on that. There are ways to recover hit points to somebody who is dying. However, your wisdom modifier and the fact that you're trained in medicine plays no part in that. In Pathfinder, there are many defined ways to use your skills and ways to vastly improve them so that they scale with the game's math at higher levels and compete with what spells are providing you as you level up in terms of utility. There are several defined ways to use the medicine skill that include Treat Wounds, which is a limitless way to restore hit points to player characters. You must be trained in medicine. You spend 10 minutes and do a DC 15 medicine check to heal 2d8 hit points. A critical success increases that to 4d8, but a critical failure does 1d8 slashing damage to them. Yes, every +1 matters. You don't want to kill your ally. There is a 1-hour cooldown per character who is benefiting from your ministrations that starts from the moment you start the activity, so you can do it every 60 minutes. So yeah, medicine not only matters in Pathfinder, it's downright essential if a party is dealing with more than 1 encounter in a day. It allows you, if you have enough time, to restore your party to full health between combats without using spell slots. Also, skills in Pathfinder can improve after first level. You can invest in them and increase them to higher tiers. There's being trained, then expert, which is unlocked at 3rd level, master, unlocked at 7th level, and Legendary, unlocked at 15th level. Higher proficiencies unlock more amazing skill feats, but also they improve your base Treat Wounds ability. They each unlock a more difficult, higher DC version of Treat Wounds that can increase your hit points by more. When you're Legendary, you can attempt a DC 40 check and add 50 to the number that you heal. You also can gain skill feats in Pathfinder. You get one from your background at 1st level, and can choose another at every even-numbered level. There are popular medicine feats that many consider essential. Continual Recovery lets to continuously treat wounds a person without a cooldown. Ward Medic lets you treat wounds multiple people, up to 8 people at once when you're Legendary. And Assurance means you no longer have to roll the d20 when attempting. You get a decent roll for your level and proficiency. By level 3, Assurance lets you automatically succeed on treat wounds, which has its own obvious value. And skills can be important in battle in Pathfinder. There is a skill feat called Battle Medicine, which only costs 1 action that can give an ally the amount of healing of treat wounds with a single action. You can Battle Medicine the same ally only once per day, however. And it's a little bit bonkers thematically. You only need 1 action, and you don't need a free hand to do it. You just need to be wearing a healer's kit. But it's a level of suspension of disbelief that players accept because hit points swing wildly in Pathfinder, and people are not complaining because it's really helpful. And it also means that healing in combat is not limited to the spellcasters. Martial characters can be valuable healers in Pathfinder. So long as you have a decent wisdom, you can be quite an effective healer in combat. So if the cleric goes down, the fighter can help her out. There are other defined ways to use the medicine skill. We covered treat poison earlier, administer first aid for treating bleeding. That's also the way to stabilize an ally. And you can also treat disease, which kind of works the same way as treat poison did earlier, except it requires 8 hours of attention on an ally. So that is my next law school episode. If Pathfinder 2e intrigues you, and I hope this intrigued you, here are some resources to check out. I think the main mental obstacle that people have to checking out Pathfinder is the belief that it is unapproachable and too complicated for them. And to that, I'd like to point people to my video that is provocatively titled, Pathfinder is the easiest RPG to learn, and I'm actually speaking specifically about the beginner box product. This is the video where I review it. It actually teaches the rules as you play. You can even open the box and run the game out of the box as a new game master, and it tells you step by step what to do. And the included adventure, which has its own flip mat, teaches everybody the rules of the game room by room systematically. And I demonstrate how it teaches combat in the first room in that video. Also, of course, look at my law school series where I give a detailed overview of Pathfinder and compare it to D&D 5e. I'll have a link at the end of the video and in the video description. Also, if you're a learn by doing kind of person, you can check out the free Steam game Quest for the Golden Candelabra, which has an excellent user interface modeled after the excellent Solasta 5e game. It has tooltips that explain things as you hover over them, including combat roll results, special abilities. All of the Pathfinder rules are transparent and simply explained, and it's a great way to learn and reinforce what you've learned learning Pathfinder. That developer also has created a very inexpensive, I believe it's $6, sequel called Dawnsbury Days that goes up to level 4, has a growing fan community that's creating content for it, and the developer is also working on a DLC that extends it to 8th level. And of course I have to mention the How It's Played channel, which has a lot of videos that are shorter than mine that explain individual rules and rule subsystems in Pathfinder 2e. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe to support my channel, and support my Patreon, which gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. And if you haven't yet, join my Discord community. I hang out there a lot. We talk about Pathfinder 2e and other gaming. And if you want to play Pathfinder, we have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.